Switzerland. So Switzerland decided to start their own tank program, and this is one of the vehicles they came up with. This is a PZ-68. It's basically an improved model of the first tank they made, the PZ-61. Nice and narrow, so it could climb Swiss mountain roads, and it's got a very sophisticated steering system because you don't want to be pulling the lever too far one way and disappearing over the edge somewhere. Now we've seen the Centurions and the Chieftains already here. You're looking there at a Chieftain going past. It's marked up. British Army tank goes into service in the 1960s. Comes out of service, really last service. Back in 1957, NATO said all tanks in the future should have multi-fuel engines that could run on diesel, petrol, whatever the available fuel was. Everyone ignored that apart from Britain, so we spent a lot of time and energy trying to come up with this L60 multi-fuel engine. In the end, we only ever gave it diesel, and it really was a problem. So in the service life, famously, Chieftain tanks. The Swiss weren't stupid. They bought the British gun. That's the L7 105mm gun. It was a gun that was made. The Hungarians drove a T-55 tank into the British Embassy compound in Hungary, and we were able to measure the armour thickness on the front of the T-55 tank. And that frightened Britain because basically at the time our Centurion had something called a 20-pounder gun on them, and we thought our 20-pounders wouldn't be able to penetrate into like the enemy. That was going to be the T-55 tank. So at Fort Austin, they started 55mm Oerlikon cannons, and they can put a huge amount of ammunition up into the sky very, very quickly, which means that you've got a much better chance of taking down a jet that's coming in, however slow, trying to West Germany with all those young people sitting there not contributing to NATO. So they took the painful choice. They invited back some Wehrmacht generals from World War II, and they helped set up the new modern Bundeswehr, which was the West German army. And the German designers, and amazingly that included, for the Leopard 1, that included Ferdinand Porsche of World War II fame. It included someone called Ernst Chieftain, who had helped design German tanks in World War II. They all helped put the Leopard together, and the Leopard itself ended up going in a very different direction than that later war heavy German armour. 1970s, those countries ended up moving on to Leopard rather than a British replacement. So Canada, Netherlands, lots of other countries, Belgium, ended up buying the Leopard 1, and that's why you'll see lots of different variations between each country. Quite often have a slightly different criteria, different sometimes sizing systems, different levels of armour protection. So you can see on this Leopard, as it goes through the area here, goes up the mound, it's got extra armour bolted on the side of the turret, and you can see the bolt holes where more armour protection would have been put, spaced armour on the end of that turret. Ultimately, the Leopard tank story is interesting because they were very clever, the Germans. They kept on building on the Leopard 1, then they moved on to the Leopard 2. And they were able to have protection, but they were very good at being able to keep the mobility of the tank up. They were still one of the fastest tanks going, and so technically fast factories as well as those who took the Gepard and carried the first system there, radar turning, and again it can engage the target. So they disposed of their Leopard 1 tanks. About the same time the Dutch army thought the same thing, and then the fighting kicked off in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the Canadian forces were sent there. Canada had just got rid of the Leopard 1s and realised they still needed tanks again, so ended up in an emergency purchase, bought more Leopards and Leopard 2s from the Germans. Same with the Netherlands, they got rid of their Leopard 1 tanks. So the Americans had to reinvigorate their tank programs, and they started a series of tanks. This is a later one called the M60, but they were called the Pattern Tank series. M47, M48 tanks. They were made in a bit of a hurry, and they had an enormous, and they also realised that some of them weren't really up to it. So their earlier M47 tanks, they were in service a very short space of time, and then they handed them on to other countries whilst they developed what they thought was going to be a better tank of their own. Now we've got driving around at the moment, there's an M60 tank there. This is the sort of end of this Pattern family. They all look very similar. They are basically the very similar belly of your tank, because it might flip you over. Obviously no good at all to anyone. So the M60 has got a V-shaped or boat-shaped hull, so that the blast will be vented up the sides of the vehicle, and you might lose a couple of road wheels, but the crew are still safe inside. I keep coming back to that L7 British gun. That's the gun they again put on the LB. Again, the Soviets were very sensible when they were putting vehicle fleets together. They might be crude, but they realised it's so much easier if we've got the same engines, the same track systems, but again, a family of vehicles, of armoured personnel carriers, of the 2S1, they put artillery on the top of it, and we're seeing a missile carrier driving around, showing how ubiquitous that base vehicle really was. So the M60, you can hear that very distinctive engine noise in the back. Now in the end, America made over 10,000 of those M60 tanks, which is why, again, it's just the scale of them and the way they could do it, including spare parts, which is why, again, this idea about keeping fleets going. Here in the back, you can see the dozer blade on the front there. It was used for clearing, making scrapes for hiding tanks in, clearing obstacles. We've got the Centurion gun tank there going past as well. And in last place, the Chieftain. We've also got another version. Now the Centurion without its V's on, it's got, if you notice, the different tracks on it. This is rubber track because when the Centurion was in service, NATO and Britain came out with a rule. They were fed up of aggressive metal track, ripping up the road all the time. So if you look, the AVRE and the Centurion with a gun tank just about to go over the tabletop there, it's what they call hush puppy track. It's actually got rubber pads on, and rubber pads means you don't. As I mentioned, for the driver, he's got to find that point of balance. He's just looking at the sky as he drives up the slope, so he's got to listen to his engine, feel the vehicle, get to the point of balance, and not take his foot off the accelerator until exactly the right moment, otherwise he'll roll back. So these are all arts that people learn. When you go down a slope in a gun tank, you notice a lot of the tank guns are getting longer as time goes on. So you are taught to traverse your turret to the side when you go up and over. Now, unfortunately, some of these vehicles, obviously not all the turret systems are working, so the idea of traversing is not always possible, because what vehicles coming around as well, Chieftain armoured and with repair vehicles. It's got the crane on to be able to lift engines on the Chieftain, sadly broke down quite often. So you replace the whole of the engine in the field, send it back to get its repair done, unless you can do a quick repair. And so we've got one of those variants there driving around that would be able to lift the pack up And again, dozer blades, really important, helping dig in the ground. Mines from in front of the vehicles, roads, might be a mobility film. We can repair that. So